The morning Walter set out to fix his old mailbox, he never imagined it would trigger a storm from the HOA president herself. The sun filtered through branches already shedding their orange coats, casting patchy light across Walter Harlan's front yard. The navy blue paint can sat at his feet, lid off, brush in hand. The old wooden mailbox had weathered time better than most things, except, perhaps, his wife. She'd chosen the color all those years ago, insisting it matched the shutters just so. Her laughter echoed faintly in his mind as he traced a smooth line down the post, each stroke a quiet prayer. He hadn't touched that mailbox since she passed. This morning, though, he had woken with an odd sense of resolve. Maybe it was the chill in the October air, or the way the sunlight had slanted through the curtains. Or maybe it was just time. Leaves rustled gently as Martha Chin strolled by, her cane clicking softly against the sidewalk. "Walter. That blue's brighter than your Sunday shirt." He chuckled without looking up. "It's Marion's shade." She called it, properly dignified. Martha smiled, lips pinched warmly. "She'd be proud you're finally fixing it." By noon, the paint had dried, and Walter was back inside, settling into his armchair. He didn't notice the envelope tucked into the screen door until late afternoon. The paper was stiff, official-looking. He opened it with a finger already guessing at its contents. Violation notice, property infraction number 114, unapproved mailbox color. HOA Regulation 7C prohibits any non-neutral color without written approval. His jaw tightened. At the bottom, Karen Bellwood's signature curved with flourish, bold and precise. He remembered her from last month's community meeting, straight-backed, smile-taut, her questions always loaded with polite disapproval. He sighed and folded the paper neatly, setting it aside. Not worth the fuss. The next morning, the tension simmered hotter. A second envelope, this one bearing a bright red strip across the top, fine notice, $200 due in 10 days. He read it twice, then a third time. The same neat signature. He ran a hand down his face, breath caught halfway. The gloves, Marion's old gardening gloves, still hung by the door, fingers curled like they remembered her hands. At Annie's cafe that afternoon, Walter stirred his coffee absently while the others chatted. "She find you? For blue paint?" Martha's voice cut across the table like a saw. "She said it clashes with the neighborhood palette," Walter muttered. Stan grunted. "Palette my foot. Karen's drunk on her little rulebook." "Don't let it get to you," Martha added. "You know how she is. Last week she warned the Jenkinses for leaving their porch pumpkin past 8 p.m. Walter gave a tired smile. Marion always said HOA stands for happiness often abolished. The table chuckled, but it didn't last. The laughter petered out, replaced by glances exchanged over black coffee and half-eaten pie. By Saturday, Walter had nearly put the whole thing out of mind, until Adam knocked on the door. His grandson filled the doorway like a question mark, sleeves rolled, duffel slung over one shoulder. "Brought you that tool set you wanted," Adam said, stepping in. They talked a while, weather, football, retirement routines. Only as Adam was leaving the kitchen did Walter hand him the violation notice. Adam's eyes scanned it once, then again, his brow tightening. "You didn't tell me about this." Walter shrugged. "It's just paint. Let it go." Adam didn't respond immediately. He glanced at the gloves by the door, the brush still soaking in a jar of thinner outside. Then, in a low voice, he said, "This is nonsense." Later that afternoon, as Walter trimmed the hedges out front, Karen approached. She wore a pressed cream blazer and sunglasses far too large for the cloudy sky. Her heels clicked lightly on the concrete. "Mr. Harland," she began, voice coated in sugar. "I hope you've had a chance to review our community guidelines. The mailbox situation." "I read the letter," he interrupted. Karen tilted her head, lips pursed. "We take aesthetics seriously here in Maplewood Pines." Behind her, Adam stood by the porch. Silent. Watching. Walter offered no reply, just a measured nod. "Well," Karen continued, I'd hate for this to escalate. Have a pleasant afternoon. She turned sharply and walked away. Walter watched her retreat until she rounded the corner. He exhaled, slow and heavy. I'll take care of it, Grandpa, Adam says calmly. She has no idea who she's picked a fight with. Adam's legal instincts kick in, but it's not about revenge, it's about respect for the man who raised him. He sat by the front window of his grandfather's house, a steaming mug in hand, HOA documents splayed across the table like fallen leaves. Outside, orange pumpkins and ghost cutouts adorned porches with cheerful menace, but inside, Adam's focus narrowed like a courtroom spotlight. His laptop blinked softly, pulling up Maplewood Pines bylaws, 3 decades old and barely digitized. Walter had stepped out early to help Martha set up tables for the yard sale, his mood noticeably dimmer than last weekend. Adam watched him shuffle across the yard, pausing briefly to adjust the sleeves of his sweater as if to shake off something heavier. Adam turned back to the screen. Article 4, Section 9. That clause referenced mailbox uniformity, but in vague terms, neutral tones encouraged where possible. Nothing enforceable. He muttered, encouraged isn't mandatory, and jotted a note. Memories stirred as he highlighted the text. He was 16 again, sitting in the passenger seat of Walter's old Buick, gripping a yellow parking citation. The fine had been unjust, a meter maid's oversight. Walter had strolled into the hearing calmly, quoting codes and precedents like a professor. They'd walked out, fine dismissed, and Adam had stared at his grandfather like he'd discovered a superhero's secret identity. Now, he returned to the present with that same spark in his chest. He dialed a number listed under HOA contacts. Hi, this is Adam Harland. I'm reviewing a few points in the HOA charter and had a quick clarification question. May I speak with Nathan Caldwell? A pause. Then, this is Nathan, a young voice replied, cautious. Adam smiled, adjusting his tone to something friendly, disarming. I'm Walter's grandson. Just want to make sure I'm interpreting a couple of provisions correctly. Nathan hesitated. Sure, what do you need? Adam noted the flicker of uncertainty, just enough. He asked about fine escalation procedures and the legality of imposing liens without certified vote. Nathan answered, but his pauses grew longer. You've read all the bylaws? Nathan finally asked. Every line, Adam replied, coolly. Some are interesting. There was a silence on the other end that said more than words. Outside, the Maplewood Pines community yard sale was in full swing. Children darted between tables with sticky fingers and half-eaten candy corn. Walter stood by a folding table lined with books, old tools, and porcelain figurines Marion had collected over the years. He smiled politely as neighbors stopped to chat or haggle over trinkets. Is that a law textbook? Martha picked up a thick volume, squinting. Oh, Walter chuckled, hadn't seen that in years. Price tag says $25. Well, then, he grinned, justice on sale today. They both laughed, the kind that softened wrinkles rather than deepened them. Across the street, Diane Pearson frowned from her spot beside Karen's table, where meticulously labeled household items sat untouched. She glanced at Adam with narrowed eyes as he approached. Afternoon, Adam greeted her. Diane nodded stiffly. I hear you've been asking about our charter. Just brushing up, he said lightly. You know how lawyers are. Karen arrived not long after. She wore a burnt orange scarf, clipboard in hand, and a smile like chilled tea. She handed Walter another envelope, this one thinner but no less serious in tone. Walter, she said, voice oozing courtesy, due to lack of compliance, the HOA may begin proceedings to place a lien on your property. Martha gasped quietly behind him. Walter's mouth opened, then closed. You can't be serious, Adam interjected. Karen turned her smile toward him. I assure you, we follow due process. Back at the house that evening, Walter sat hunched, staring at the envelope as though it might vanish. Maybe I should just repaint it, he said softly. I didn't mean to cause all this. Adam pulled out a chair and sat across from him. You've lived here longer than she has. You followed every rule. This isn't about paint, it's about principle. Walter didn't speak. You remember when I got that parking ticket in high school? You walked into that room like you owned it. Taught me more in 10 minutes than law school did in a year. Walter's eyes flicked up, quiet appreciation lingering there. I'm not doing this to fight for the sake of it, Adam added. I'm doing it because I saw what fairness looks like, and I saw it in you. The kettle hissed gently in the background, filling the silence with something steady. They sipped black coffee at the kitchen table, the night air growing colder just outside the window. Adam set his cup down slowly, pulling out a final printout. Grandpa, he said over coffee, what if I told you she doesn't even own her house legally? Behind every misplaced find is a paper trail, and Adam is about to follow it straight to Karen's front door. The courthouse's record room smelled faintly of dust and time, a place where the past lingered in metal filing cabinets and faded manila folders. Adam adjusted his scarf and leaned over the clerk's desk, tapping politely to draw attention. Karen Bellwood, he said. Property title history, please. The clerk squinted, fingers moving across an aging keyboard. Maplewood Pines? Give me a sec. While she searched, Adam let his eyes drift toward the window. Late October painted the trees in shades of fire and cinnamon. Outside, gusts of wind chased dry leaves across sidewalks. Maplewood was deep in Halloween prep, pumpkins on every porch, fake cobwebs dancing on mailboxes. The printout landed with a light thud. Adam scanned the pages, eyebrows knitting. A key line stood out, title held in the name of Raymond Bellwood, with no recorded transfer after his passing 5 years ago. Karen had never formally filed for ownership. She lived in a house that, on paper, wasn't hers. Back in Maplewood, Walter raked leaves along the sidewalk, pausing now and then to catch his breath. His knees ached, and the cold crept into his joints, but the work was familiar, grounding. Across the street, Martha emerged with a thermos of homemade pumpkin soup. You look like a man who needs defrosting, she called, handing it over. Walter smiled. Smells better than liniment. They sat together on the porch steps, the rake resting beside him. Folks are talking, Martha said softly. About Karen's new Halloween memo. Walter nodded. Kids can't wear masks. No trick-or-treating past 6. No inflatables. She even banned glow sticks. She said it's for safety. Martha rolled her eyes. But Shirley's fuming. Shirley Martinez, a young mother with 2 energetic boys, was pacing up her own driveway a few houses down. Plastic bats hung limply from her porch as if mourning the joy Karen had smothered. She waved when she saw Walter and marched over, her arms crossed. Did you hear she threatened to ticket us for letting the kids ride their bikes without reflectors? She asked. They're 7, Walter. They're not out drag racing. Walter sighed, the weight of it all settling on his shoulders. Later that afternoon, he strolled past Nathan Caldwell's home. The young man was raking as well, earbuds in, head down. Walter raised a hand. Nathan waved back but didn't remove the earbuds, something evasive in the gesture. By evening, another envelope arrived on Walter's stoop. This one in bold font, stamped "Final Warning." Walter opened it under the kitchen light, mouth tightening. 10 days, he muttered. Orlean proceedings begin. The doorbell rang. It was Officer Dan, in uniform but off-duty, holding a paper bag. Brought you that lentil soup from Helen's Deli, Dan said. Heard about the latest letter. Walter stepped aside. You and half the town. Over coffee, Dan leaned in, voice low. Off the record, HOA can't place a lien without city registration. Maplewood Pines hasn't updated its registration since 2003. That makes things wobbly. Walter chuckled dryly. Wobbly. Like Karen's diplomacy. Dan smiled. Let me know if you need backup. Not on duty, but I still vote. Meanwhile, Adam printed a draft of the legal notice, clean, professional, firm. He knew exactly which statute to cite and which loophole to illuminate. But instead of delivering it directly to Karen, he had another idea. The next morning, the diner bustled with quiet chatter and the clink of cutlery on ceramic plates. Nathan sat alone in a corner booth, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, eyes scanning HOA spreadsheets on his tablet. Adam slid into the seat across from him, an envelope thick with documentation in hand. "You might want to read this before Karen drags everyone down with her." The envelope Karen delivered wasn't just a warning, it was a declaration of war. It arrived on a morning wrapped in clouds, with cold winds whispering through the naked maple trees. Walter opened the door to find the certified envelope propped neatly against the doormat, like a predator crouched low. The harsh lettering on the outside read, "Final notice, action required." His breath hitched. Inside, the language was as icy as the November air. Karen had invoked Article 6, Section 4B of the HOA Charter, stating Walter's continued non-compliance would result in a lien being filed against his property in 10 days. The tone of the document was less procedural, more personal, like a scolding letter penned by a school principal, except the stakes now involved his home. Walter stood still in the foyer, the envelope trembling slightly in his hand. The silence in the house was deep, broken only by the rustle of dried leaves scratching the windows. The sight of his late wife's gardening gloves still hanging near the door brought a flicker of comfort, and guilt. Later that afternoon, Walter tried to distract himself by sweeping the porch, but the handle of the broom felt heavier than usual. His vision blurred briefly, and he leaned against the railing. When Martha saw him from across the street, she rushed over, worry etched into her expression. "I'm calling Adam," she said firmly, guiding him back inside and offering a glass of warm cider. Walter didn't object. Adam arrived less than 2 hours later, his voice calm but charged. He read the notice once, then again. "So this is how she wants to play," he murmured. That evening, at the kitchen table littered with forms and folders, Adam finalized the counterclaim. It was no longer a matter of mailbox color, it was about due process. The HOA charter, as it turned out, lacked proper registration with the township. Without it, the enforcement actions were, at best, a bluff. At worst, intimidation. He placed the documents into a manila folder and set them aside, then turned to Walter. "You okay?" Walter offered a tired smile. "I've fought tougher battles. Just never thought I'd be having one with my mailbox at this age." Meanwhile, Nathan Caldwell stood at the end of the walkway, fidgeting with his keys. He'd read Adam's letter, the one slid across the diner table days ago, and now questions swirled in his head. He hesitated, then knocked. I had a few questions about this clause here," he began, pointing to the photocopied section Adam had highlighted. "About enforcement authority." Adam welcomed him in, offering coffee and a quiet place to talk. Walter mostly listened. Nathan looked pale, uncertain. "I didn't know Karen was pushing it this far," he admitted. "We've never actually filed a lien before." Word was already spreading. Martha decided to do what Maplewood Pines had always done when things got murky, gather. That Friday, she posted handwritten signs around the block: "Community Coffee, Annie's Cafe, 3 p.m. Neighbors welcome." Inside the warm walls of Annie's, cinnamon candles flickered beside pumpkin pies cooling near the register. Chairs scraped and boots clomped as the regulars settled in, each clutching their own interpretation of what was happening on Willow Lane. Walter arrived quietly, Adam trailing behind. He looked older today, creased, tired, but also carrying something steadier. As the room hushed, he cleared his throat. "I've lived here for over 40 years, he began. "I've seen our street lose its leaves and find them again more times than I can count. This place, it matters. It's not just zip codes and bylaws." He paused, letting the silence fill in his sentiment. "They may own the forms," he said finally, voice trembling but steady, "but we own this street." There was no applause, no grandstanding, just nods, and the subtle shift of people remembering what community once meant. Across the street, through the fogged-up cafe window, Karen watched. Her coat buttoned too tightly, her shoulders tense. She lingered a moment, then turned and walked away, lips tight, her silence louder than any speech. Karen thought silence meant submission, but now the silence is broken. A robin's song cut faintly through the frosty air as Walter opened his front door, scarf bundled tight, breath blooming white. The neighborhood looked still, almost picture-book perfect. Pumpkin wreaths hung on doors, miniature scarecrows planted beside mailboxes. But beneath that surface, change rustled louder than any wind. Adam sat at the dining table, sleeves rolled up, sifting through paperwork and emails with a patience honed in courtrooms. The growing file of wrongful fines and neighbor statements spilled across the surface, categorized, footnoted. There were parking penalties given on street cleaning days that never happened, citations for lawn decorations that didn't exist, and warning letters that were sent days before violations allegedly occurred. That one, Adam said, tapping a page, got a $75 fine for a wind chime. Unapproved decorative noise-making structure. He raised an eyebrow. And she's hearing impaired. Walter folded his hands. People trusted the silence. Thought it meant peace. Turns out, it just meant no one was listening. Later that morning, they walked to the old community center, where the senior brunch had become a small tradition. Cinnamon rolls and gentle jazz filled the room. Walter, a quiet fixture in the crowd, was invited to speak. He declined at first. But when the hostess insisted, he rose. I was taught to respect order, he began. But order without fairness isn't order at all. It's control. My wife would have told me to speak sooner. She had the better backbone. The room gave a low, knowing laugh. She solved disagreements with apple pie and a firm stare, he added softly. And somehow, people always left smiling. That same afternoon, Nathan stopped by. He looked worn, like someone who hadn't slept without checking over his shoulder. I found something, he said, lowering his voice. Karen was warned, by our HOA lawyer, about overstepping. She hid the memo. Told us it was just interpretive advice. But it said point blank she couldn't threaten liens without board review. He handed over the printed email thread, complete with timestamps and Karen's terse responses. By the time of the next HOA meeting, whispers had turned to murmurs. The community hall buzzed with unspoken tension. Diane Pearson, clipboard in hand, walked in stiffly. When Adam arrived with a leather folder and calm eyes, she didn't greet him. But she didn't look away either. The meeting started with strained formality. Karen's voice, once icy and controlled, cracked around the edges. Her hair was pinned tighter than usual. Her eyes darted more often. When Walter entered late, a hush fell. He sat in the back, near Shirley, who gave him a comforting pat on the hand. When Adam asked about board member access to legal memos, Karen snapped, "That's privileged information." Nathan stood up. Not when it was about board compliance. The room shifted. I didn't want to cause confusion, Karen insisted. You caused confusion by hiding it, Diane whispered, horrified. Shirley stood. My kids cried when you canceled Halloween. My HOA dues paid for that newsletter. It unraveled fast. Karen's voice rose. I've done everything by the book. Walter remained still, quiet but present. You, Karen snarled, pointing at him, you turned this whole street against me. You think just because you're old and sad, people will side with you? Gasps rippled. Phones raised. Walter blinked, stunned. He didn't answer. But behind him, someone had already hit record. The next morning, a letter to the editor appeared in the local paper. It was signed, a Maplewood neighbor, and detailed an atmosphere of fear and favoritism under Karen's leadership. It ended, we don't need a queen on Willow Lane. We need a neighbor. That afternoon, Walter and Adam shared a quiet Thanksgiving at home. A small roasted turkey. Mashed potatoes with too much butter. The silence between them wasn't heavy, it was full. I remember your grandma settling things with pie, Walter said, eyes a little wet. She once stopped a fence dispute by baking both sides into submission. Adam chuckled. Sounds like her. Evening settled. Outside, frost clung to every shingle. Walter dozed in his armchair, blanket over his knees, as Adam clicked open his inbox. One new email. It was from the HOA's official attorney. Subject line, Board Review Decision. Immediate suspension. The last line read clearly, pending review, Karen Bellwood is suspended from HOA operations. A storm may shake the trees, but roots hold fast, and Walter was rooted deeper than anyone thought. Snowflakes drifted gently onto the rooftops of Maplewood pines, brushing white onto the amber leaves that clung stubbornly to their branches. The air had quieted. The fire had burned, the sparks had flown, but now what remained was warmth, the kind found in old quilts, shared meals, and hands that had weathered many winters. Walter stepped outside, his breath rising in little clouds. A string of Christmas lights blinked softly along Martha's fence. The neighborhood seemed to breathe again. No more clipped notices on doors. No more terse warnings tucked beneath windshield wipers. Inside the community hall, the atmosphere was not one of triumph, but of calm resolution. Nathan Caldwell stood at the front of the modest room, facing a small gathering of neighbors, his voice low but clear. "I failed you," he said simply. "I stayed quiet too long. I saw the memos. I knew what she was doing wasn't right. And I didn't say anything." There were murmurs, but no jeers. Just nods. Shirley and Martha exchanged a glance. Then Shirley rose. "We've all been quiet," she said. "Time to fix that." Behind them on the bulletin board, a handwritten flyer had been pinned up, HOA Reform Committee Interest Meeting, Friday at 3 p.m. All welcome. At Walter's home, Adam laid out the final legal documents on the kitchen table. His expression was calm, professional, but there was something more in his voice. "This is what we're offering," he said, flipping the top page toward Walter. "Drop the lien. Freeze any future fines until a full audit. And make the books open, transparently." Walter adjusted his glasses. "They'll agree?" Adam nodded. They already did. Later that afternoon, a vote was held, not dramatic, not contentious. Just hands raised around a long table, some trembling, some sure. Karen Bellwood sat at the far end. Her eyes flicked from face to face, as one by one, the people she once controlled chose to remove her from office. The HOA attorney confirmed what Adam had suspected weeks ago: Karen's house title had never completed its transfer from her late husband's estate. By the very rules she enforced, she had no standing. The bylaws, as outdated as they were unflinching on that point. Karen made no statement. She simply stood, gathered her purse, and walked out. That evening, Walter stood beneath his newly painted mailbox, still navy blue, still standing firm through sleet and cold. He looked down the street, watching a young couple wrap a pine garland along their porch rail. Lights flickered in the dusk. Holiday warmth, blooming in spite of the chill. He held a folded paper in one hand, a hand-drawn map of the old neighborhood, one Karen had left years ago in a committee meeting, now yellowed at the edges. "I'm going to give this back," he said to Adam. "You don't have to," Adam replied, surprised. "I know," Walter said. "That's why I will." The walk to Karen's house was slow. Not because of age, but because of thought. He knocked once. The door opened. Karen stood there, diminished. Not humiliated, but smaller somehow, like someone who had finally met the limits of their own reflection. Walter held out the map. "You left this," he said. "Figured you might still care where we all live." Her fingers took it slowly. She didn't speak. As Walter turned, her door clicked shut behind him. Across the street, Adam watched from under the diner awning, coat collar turned against the cold. The first true snowfall of the season had begun, catching in his dark hair, melting into his scarf. He glanced toward Karen's house. The porch light blinked on. "Justice," he murmured, not looking away. "Sometimes walks slow, but it always gets there." Snow blanketed the neighborhood in silence, except for the echo of everything Karen had broken. The hush of early December had settled deep into the corners of Maplewood Pines. Lawns wore thick quilts of snow, and wreaths hung from every porch except one. Warm lights blinked behind frosted windows, soft carols floated from radios, and the smell of cinnamon clung to scarves like a memory. But under the garland and bows, the quiet held something more, an unfinished echo. Walter stepped carefully along the sidewalk, a walking stick in one hand, a sled in the other. Beside him, a boy of about 10 sniffled as he looked down at the cracked runner. "She took a corner too sharp," the boy mumbled. Walter smiled gently. "They always do the first snow. Let's fix her up." They worked in quiet rhythm under the awning of Walter's garage. A bit of tape, a new bolt from an old coffee tin, and a hand-rubbed polish later, the sled looked almost new. The boy beamed, then took off in the direction of the hill near the park, boots crunching, laughter trailing behind. Walter watched him go, his breath steaming in the stillness. He hadn't meant to become someone the children looked to, but it had happened anyway, slowly, honestly. That morning, Adam had handed him a printed copy of an anonymous letter the HOA had received overnight. "It accuses you of forging the original HOA documents," Adam said flatly. "Sloppy attempt. No signature, no legal merit. But you should know." Walter didn't respond right away. Instead, he stared out at the tree in front of his house, its branches rimmed in white, each one bending slightly with the weight. "She's still reaching," Walter said finally. Adam nodded. "She's losing her grip. Last flare before the end." Later that day, Martha had caught sight of Karen hunched beside a park bench, whispering to a young man with a press badge. No article ever appeared. Either the reporter had seen through her or realized the neighborhood wasn't interested in more drama. Meanwhile, inside the cafe, Shirley and Martha worked tirelessly over cocoa-stained checklists and envelopes of donation money. Adam leaned over the counter, offering legal advice to Shirley's cousin about a landlord dispute. It wasn't court, but it mattered. The buzz around the holiday event grew. Maplewood Pines hadn't had a proper tree lighting in years. Karen had cancelled them, citing budgetary constraints and liability risk. But now, with her gone, the plan came alive again. Children crafted ornaments. A carpenter neighbor built a wooden reindeer. And someone, shyly, suggested Walter speak at the ceremony. He hesitated at first. "I'm not a speaker," he told Adam. "You're a presence," Adam replied. "And we all need that." The night of the event, the whole street shimmered with light. Lanterns hung from trees, cider steamed from paper cups, and a chorus of retired teachers hummed harmonies over a portable speaker. The tall pine at the edge of the park had been draped in strands of white bulbs, ready for its first lighting in almost a decade. Walter stepped forward slowly, the cold air prickling his skin. Children looked up at him. So did their parents. Adam stood nearby, quiet. He cleared his throat. "I once believed that silence was dignity," Walter began. "That letting things go was the high road. But I learned this year that silence can let rot grow beneath roots we thought were strong." A pause. The wind stirred. Law matters. But so does kindness. So does standing up, not just for ourselves, but for each other. He looked around at the faces, lined, young, tear-brimmed. This street, this community, isn't about rules. It's about people. May we never forget that. He reached forward, flipped the old brass switch. The tree blinked once, then glowed, white, warm, unwavering. The crowd burst into applause, not loud, but long. Shirley wiped her cheek. Martha hugged a neighbor she hadn't spoken to in months. From across the street, a figure stood behind an unlit window. Karen watched, her arms crossed, shoulders hunched. Her house was dark, undecorated, silent. As the light spilled across the road, catching on snowflakes and garlands, she pressed one hand to the glass. A single tear fell, but no one saw it. The porch light hadn't been on in years, not since Walter lost his wife. Tonight, it glowed. The snow lay soft and clean over Maplewood Pines, blanketing the world in a hush broken only by the occasional crunch of boots and the chime of distant bells. Christmas Eve brought a kind of peace that couldn't be legislated, just felt, through candlelit windows, through the laughter of children slipping through icy driveways, through the scent of nutmeg and pine drifting on cold air. Walter stood quietly on his porch, wool scarf tucked into his coat, hands careful as they tied a faded blue and white scarf to the railing. It had been hers, his wife's favorite. She'd knitted it during a winter much like this one, humming carols beneath her breath while he read by the fire. For years it had hung untouched in their hall closet. Tonight, he let it breathe again. Lights flickered to life across the neighborhood, some twinkling, some warm and steady. Small bags with candles lined walkways, a quiet tradition Martha had revived this year. Neighbors wandered, hand in hand or cane in hand, pausing now and then to admire each other's decorations or share a bit of rum cake. At Shirley's porch, children placed wrapped cookies into baskets for delivery rounds. At Walter's house, the door remained open just a crack, enough for Adam to step in and out as he packed his final bag. His briefcase leaned by the stairs, already dusted with stray pine needles from the tree they'd put up 2 weeks earlier. In his hand, Adam held a letter. "It's from the interim chair," he said. "Thanking me." "And you?" Walter raised an eyebrow. "She says the board voted to adopt a rotating leadership model. No more permanent heads. More transparency. It's refreshing." Walter only nodded. They also finalized Karen's removal. No appeals. No votes left. Just silence. Silence had taken up residence at Karen's house for weeks. Lights never came on. Deliveries sat on her stoop until someone else moved them. The curtain in the front room stayed half-closed, as though unsure whether to witness or retreat. Adam folded the letter and slid it into his coat. "She'll move, eventually." Walter looked out across the street. "Or she won't." Later, after the crowd thinned and the cider grew cold, Walter stepped off his porch with a small plate of cookies and made his way to the house across the road. He didn't knock. He didn't leave a note. Just placed the plate on the step, adjusted the plastic wrap so it wouldn't blow off, and turned back toward home. He didn't see the curtain shift. Didn't hear the creak of old floorboards. He didn't need to. Back inside, he poured 2 cups of coffee, one just the way Adam liked it, with a splash of milk and too much sugar. They sat by the window as the snow began again, drifting like feathers from a broken pillow. "Funny," Walter said, after a while, "how many battles start because someone's scared they've already lost." Adam sipped slowly, watching the flurries catch in the light. "You mean Karen?" Walter nodded. "Maybe some folks fight to control because they've lost control elsewhere." Adam didn't respond right away. He simply set down his cup and leaned back. The warmth between them didn't need words. Across the way, Karen's windows remained dark, except for the faint blue glow of a television. No guests arrived. No music played. But the plate of cookies disappeared sometime after midnight. Adam stood at the threshold later that night, bags packed, rental car idling. He looked back once more. "I'll be back for spring," he said. Walter smiled. Snow should be gone by then. As Adam pulled away, the car's headlights cast long shadows over the street. And then, just as the car turned the corner, Walter stepped back inside, and flipped the switch. The porch light flickered on. Across the street, Karen's curtain finally closes. The snow hadn't melted yet, but something in Maplewood Pines had thawed, the silence of neighbors, the fear of speaking up, the weight of rules used to suppress instead of protect. Walter never raised his voice, but his quiet dignity moved mountains. What began with a painted mailbox ended as a reminder that when a community remembers its heart, no rulebook can overrule what's right. Sometimes, it takes just one porch light shining steady to show others the way forward. If you've ever felt powerless under someone else's control, remember, together, neighbors can bring warmth back to even the coldest street. Because when power is misused, it isolates, but when it's shared, it illuminates.